When you stop contacting her, you think you're stepping back to regain control. But control isn't decided by who speaks first. It's decided by who can tolerate uncertainty without collapsing. Silence doesn't reward the man who waits the longest. It exposes the man who needs reassurance the fastest. That's why so many men break their own position during silence. Not because she won, but because the quiet forced them to face something uncomfortable. That their value might have come from consistency, not desire. Silence doesn't manufacture attraction. It strips away routine and shows what's real underneath. And if you don't understand what that silence is revealing, you'll mistake relief for progress, attention for attachment, and confirmation for control right before you give it all away. The first thing most men expect when they stop contacting her is some kind of reaction. Panic, regret, an emotional spike that proves their absence mattered. They imagine silence as a switch. Flip it, and suddenly she feels the loss. That's not what actually happens. What comes first isn't emotion at all. It's a pause. And that pause is where men lose their footing. When you stop reaching out, there's usually no immediate response, no angry message, no dramatic confrontation, no sudden realization on her end, just nothing. Quiet. And that quiet feels brutal because it leaves you alone with your thoughts. Men often interpret that lack of reaction as rejection, as proof that they never mattered in the first place. But that conclusion is premature. What's happening in this moment isn't emotional. It's structural. In most dynamics, even ones that feel mutual, one person carries the rhythm. One person initiates, one person checks in. One person keeps the connection warm. And very often that person is you. You became the certainty, the predictable presence, the constant. So when that rhythm stops, the system doesn't collapse. It doesn't explode. It doesn't rush to replace what's missing. It pauses. Think about it like this. If there's a familiar sound in your home, a clock ticking, a fan humming, and one day it stops, you don't panic instantly. You notice. Your brain registers that something is different. You adjust. That's exactly what's happening here. She notices the absence, even if she doesn't react to it consciously. The predictability is gone. The certainty is gone. And certainty is what allows people to relax and take things for granted. This is where men make a critical mistake. They treat the pause as a verdict. They assume silence means indifference. They rush to fill the gap, not because it's the right move, but because the uncertainty is unbearable. They want relief. They want to restore what felt stable. But the pause itself is the signal. If your absence truly didn't matter, there would be nothing to adjust to. No interruption, no recalibration. The fact that the dynamic has stalled means something has shifted. The autopilot has disengaged. This moment is not about winning her back. It's not about proving anything. It's the only point where the old pattern has stopped long enough for the truth to surface. And the worst thing you can do here is act too soon. Because once you rush in to relieve your own discomfort, you don't just break the silence, you restore the very pattern that made your presence feel guaranteed in the first place. This isn't the moment to move. It's the moment to watch. The reason this pause hurts so much isn't because you're losing her. It's because for the first time, you're forced to confront why you mattered. There's a distinction most men never make until silence drags it into the open. Were you valued, or were you simply relied on? Those two look identical while the connection is active. You text, she replies. You show up, she's there. Everything feels mutual. But under the surface, they operate very differently. Being valued means she wants you. Your presence adds something specific to her life. Being relied on means she's grown accustomed to your consistency. You were the emotional infrastructure, the dependable signal, the one who always showed up no matter what. When you're relied on, your absence barely registers. Not because you're insignificant, but because you were never consciously chosen. You were assumed. Like electricity, you only notice it when it's gone. And even then, the first instinct is to wait and see if it comes back on its own. But when you're valued, the pause creates discomfort. Not panic, not regret, discomfort. Something feels off. The dynamic no longer flows the way it used to, and that interruption can't be ignored as easily. This is why the pause is so emotionally brutal for men. You're not being rejected in real time. No one is saying, I don't want you. Instead, you're being removed from the pattern that once defined your role. And without that pattern, you're left asking a question most men avoid their entire lives. What was I actually bringing to the table? Uncertainty shows up on both sides here. On yours, because you no longer know where you stand. On hers, because the structure she unconsciously relied on has shifted. And this is the moment where men sabotage themselves. They break the silence too early. They reach out to check in, to restore normally, to relieve the pressure building inside them. But what they're really doing is re-establishing the old agreement. Access to you is guaranteed. And the moment access becomes guaranteed, attraction stops doing any work. Restoring the pattern feels like relief, but it comes at a cost. It kills the only opening where the truth can surface. The pause was the interruption. The interruption was the opportunity. Because this is the only moment where you get clarity without negotiation. No convincing, no chasing, no performance. Just the reality of whether your absence is felt or simply filled. Once the pause has settled, something subtle begins to take its place. Not longing, not romance, curiosity. This is where men often get confused. She starts thinking about you again, and men immediately translate that into missing you. They assume attention equals desire. It doesn't. Curiosity and desire come from very different places. Curiosity is mental. Desire is emotional. Curiosity is about regaining orientation. It's about control. When the rhythm you provided disappears, her mind starts asking questions. Not because she's attached, but because certainty has been removed. Why did he stop? Did I misread the situation? Was he pulling away on purpose? Or did I lose my position in his life without realizing it? This isn't hearing memories or feeling lost yet. This is her recalibrating. Overthinking begins, but overthinking does not mean regret. It means reassessment. She starts reviewing small moments she once brushed past. Delayed replies, conversations she deprioritized, times she assumed you'd always be there. And here's the part men struggle with most. Curiosity creates hope. You start reading into everything. A vague post, a delayed response, a story she watched but didn't react to. Suddenly, every small ambiguous signal feels loaded with meaning. You tell yourself the silence is working, that she's starting to feel it. But hope without clarity is how men get stuck. Because curiosity alone doesn't move someone toward you. It simply keeps you in their mental field. And whether that curiosity lingers or fades depends on something very specific. Were you just consistency, or were you emotional safety? If your role in her life was limited to availability, being there when she needed attention or reassurance, curiosity fades quickly. Once her mind answers its questions, there's nothing pulling it back. But if you represented stability, presence, or grounding, curiosity lasts longer than she expects. Not because she wants you back, but because your absence disrupts her sense of balance. This is the stage where most men either regain emotional footing or give it away. The test here isn't whether she's thinking about you. The test is whether you can remain grounded while she's uncertain. Can you tolerate not knowing? Can you resist the urge to resolve the tension just to soothe your own anxiety? Because the moment you rush in to clarify, explain, or reinsert yourself, you don't convert curiosity into attraction. You neutralize it. You restore certainty. And certainty is what quietly kills attraction over time. Curiosity only works in your favor when you don't rush to solve it. When you allow the imbalance to exist without trying to control the outcome, when you don't confuse mental attention with emotional attachment, if curiosity leads anywhere, it won't be because you chased it. It will be because you didn't. When curiosity doesn't find answers on its own, it looks for information without exposure. This is where social media quietly enters the picture, not as a place for connection, but as a surveillance tool. At this stage, she isn't trying to talk to you. She isn't trying to be vulnerable. She's trying to observe without revealing interest. Social media allows her to do exactly that. She can see how you're moving without risking her position. No questions asked, no doors opened. And what she's looking for isn't complicated. She's watching to see if your life continued once she lost access to it. Whether you're still moving forward or whether everything stalled the moment you stopped reaching out. She's comparing two versions of you, the one who was available to her and the one she no longer has access to. This stage isn't about validation, it's about contrast. And this is where silence either works quietly in your favor or collapses completely. Because the fastest way to erase contrast is to broadcast reaction. Sad quotes, bitter captions, thinly veiled messages about growth or strength that still orbit the situation. Even performative happiness falls flat when it's forced. All of it sends the same signal. You're still oriented around her. Orbiting kills leverage. The goal here isn't to look unbothered. Unbothered looks fake when it's manufactured. The goal is to look occupied. Occupied looks real because it is real. It communicates movement, not indifference. Direction, not resentment. This is also why women often watch without engaging. They'll view your stories, but never message you. They won't like your posts. They won't react publicly. Engagement exposes interest. Observation preserves control. And this is where men misread everything. A story view is not a signal. A like is not a decision. A follow or unfollow is not a verdict. These are data points, nothing more. They only confirm one thing. Your absence has been noticed. Nothing else. Men get stuck here because they treat observation as intention. They assume that being watched means being missed. But watching is passive. It carries no commitment. It doesn't move the dynamic forward. What it does do is shift the internal narrative. If you handle this stage correctly, the story changes from "he needed me" to "he continued without me." And that contrast is powerful, not because it pressures her, but because it removes the illusion that your presence was dependent on her response. This stage isn't about provoking action. It's about not undoing the progress silence created, because once contrast is established, the dynamic can no longer return to autopilot. And what comes next, if anything, will reveal why she was watching in the first place. When curiosity reaches a certain threshold, it stops being passive. This is where testing begins. Not romance, not vulnerability, not an emotional confession. Testing is far more subtle than that. It's an access check, a way to see whether the door to you is actually closed or whether it was never locked in the first place. The message rarely looks important. That's intentional. It might be a casual text that pretends nothing happened, a random question she could easily answer herself, a memory dropped without context, a reaction to your story that requires almost no effort. These aren't accidents, they're probes, low risk attempts to gather information without exposing intent. And the moment that message arrives, something happens inside you: relief, validation, hope. You feel seen again, relevant again, chosen again. And without even realizing it, you respond the same way you always did. Quickly, warmly, generously, you explain. You open. You lean forward emotionally, trying to secure the moment before it disappears. From your side, it feels like momentum. From hers, it's confirmation. What she learns in that instant is simple. Access never actually changed. The silence wasn't a shift, it was just a delay. She didn't lose anything, she just paused it. And once that's clear, the dynamic resets to exactly where it was before. This is why silence alone is not enough. Silence without a change in posture doesn't create leverage. It just postpones the outcome. What matters here isn't being cold or distant. It's being grounded. A grounded response doesn't punish her. It doesn't reward her either. It's calm, measured, unrushed. It reflects a new reality without needing to announce it. You respond because you choose to, not because you're relieved to be back in her orbit. And this is where the truth starts to emerge. If her interest was shallow, if she only missed the attention, the testing stops. The effort isn't worth it. She fades back again because access is no longer automatic. But if there was real attachment, testing escalates, the tone changes, the messages become warmer, the effort increases. She moves from checking access to trying to re-establish emotional footing. Even then, nothing is guaranteed. This stage isn't about winning her back. It's about not losing yourself the moment validation returns. Most men aren't prepared for this. They've spent so long wanting a sign that when it finally shows up, they hand over control without question. But tests don't create outcomes, they reveal intent. And what you do here determines whether the silence clarified the truth or whether you erased it the moment it mattered most. Eventually, the noise fades. The pause has passed. Curiosity either lingered or disappeared. Testing either happened or it didn't. And now what remains is the outcome, stripped of interpretation, fantasy, and momentum. This is where men ask the wrong question. They ask, did it work? That question keeps you trapped because it frames the entire experience around control and payoff. The right question is far more uncomfortable and far more powerful. What did this time show me? Silence always produces an answer. It's just not always the one men hope for. Sometimes the outcome is obvious. She reaches out with real effort. She wants to talk. She wants to reconnect. She tries to revisit what was lost. In those cases, silence didn't create attraction. It revealed that attraction already existed, buried under routine and over-availability. The pause removed the noise long enough for it to surface. But other times, nothing happens. No message, no test, no curiosity that turns into action. And this is where the pain hits hardest, because unanswered silence feels like rejection without closure. There's nothing to respond to, nothing to fix, nothing to reinterpret, just absence. But this is also where the greatest clarity lives. If she doesn't feel your absence enough to act, it doesn't mean you failed. It means the connection was never anchored the way you believed it was. The dynamic relied more on your presence than on her desire. And silence didn't cause that truth. It exposed it. This is the part most men resist. Silence doesn't punish her. It removes the buffer that protected you from seeing reality. It takes away the routines, the assumptions, the emotional padding, and leaves only what's real. And what's real is this: you cannot negotiate desire. You cannot reason someone into valuing you. You cannot earn commitment by showing up harder when someone is already leaning away. If she doesn't return, it doesn't mean you're unworthy. It means the relationship wasn't reciprocal. And staying attached to a one sided dynamic would have cost you far more than walking away ever will. Acceptance is not weakness here. Acceptance without bitterness, without chasing, without self blame, without trying to turn clarity into a strategy. When you accept the outcome, you stop orienting your life around someone who is no longer choosing you. And that's the paradox. The moment you stop measuring your worth by her response or lack of one, you regain something far more important than her attention. You regain your center, your direction, your emotional footing. And that's when men become most attractive again, not necessarily to her, but to life. Silence was never the strategy. It was the test, not a test of her emotions, but a test of the dynamic itself. When you stopped contacting her, you didn't press a button to make something happen. You removed yourself just long enough for the truth to surface. And the truth is always uncomfortable before it's freeing. Because not every silence brings someone back. Not every pause turns into effort. Sometimes nothing happens. And as painful as that feels, it gives you something far more valuable than false hope. It gives you information. You didn't lose anything by seeing the truth. You lost an illusion. The illusion that consistency equals value. The illusion that showing up harder creates desire. The illusion that your worth depends on someone else choosing you. Silence doesn't punish her. It protects you. It strips away the noise, the routines, the emotional bargaining, and shows you what's actually there without you having to chase, convince, or perform. And when you accept the outcome without bitterness, without trying to manipulate it into something else, something shifts. You stop trying to control her response and start reclaiming control over yourself, your attention, your energy, your direction. That's where real power lives. If this gave you clarity, subscribe. We go deeper than surface level advice here. If you've lived through this kind of silence, leave a comment. You're not the only one who's faced it. And if you know a man who's stuck waiting on hope instead of truth, share this with him. Because the moment you stop orienting your life around someone who isn't choosing you, you don't just regain balance, you regain yourself.